So recently there's been a big album cover trend in that you can really just turn anything into an album cover. So I thought I'd quickly go through how I made this album cover for my brother's EP. Let's hop into Photoshop. So start off with your photo. As you can see, it isn't an amazing photo, but hopefully after a bit of editing, make it turn into like a more tasty, more dynamic photo, more interesting to look at. This technique will work with any background and with any photo, but I do want to point out that the horizontal lines on the storefront behind him definitely help make this effect look 100 times better. So if you plan out your shoot beforehand, especially with this effect, having some sort of horizontal lines behind your subject will definitely improve the outcome of your photo. The first thing that you want to do is make 2 duplicate versions of your original photo. One we're going to blur out, and the other as safety in case you ever need a clean slate to go back to. Start out by making a selection of your subject using the magnetic lasso tool. Take your time with this and make sure to get as good a selection as you can. After you're done, we're going to switch to the polygonal lasso tool and then just fill in any parts of the selection that weren't 100% perfect. Press and hold Shift to add on to your selection, or press and hold Option to subtract from it. You'll see a little plus or minus sign when you press the buttons to let you know what you're doing. For example here, I want to fix the part under Nico's shoe, so I just hold the Shift key down and draw a new selection to add onto the main mask for your whole subject. Then after you've got it down as best you can, hit the Add Layer Mask button, and boom, he's on his own layer. Then select one of the layers that you duplicated right underneath the subject, and then go to Filter, Blur, and Motion Blur. Put the angle to 0 to get those horizontal lines going, and in this case I've set the distance to 1500 pixels. But play around with it to see what you like the most, and then watch that background completely change and make the photo so much more dynamic. Now we could end it here, this is not bad, but there's one more thing I'd like to do to just make that photo a little bit better, take it to the next level. We're going to add motion blur to the subject. This is where it gets interesting. First we're going to duplicate the subject, so duplicate Nico. Then add motion blur again, and again set the angle to 0. But this time we're going to set the distance to 75 pixels and hit OK. Now we're going to move the blurred out version slightly to the right so it looks like he's leaving some sort of trail behind him, like he's zooming past the camera. Then we duplicate the blurred out layer again and move it to the right slightly more, and repeat that for a total of 8 times so the trail is slightly longer. Then reduce the opacity to 10% on the top blurred out layer, and then gradually increase the opacity by 10% for each of the other blurred out layers, so that the last blurred out layer ends up at 90%. Dope! This is looking good. Now just highlight all the layers we just blurred out, right click, and hit Merge Layers. Highlight your newly merged layer and press on the Add Layer Mask button. Then select the layer mask you just created, and then choose the brush tool. I personally want to see Nico's face, so with the black selected, I painted over the parts where I didn't want any motion blur, so we can still make out who the subject is. And when I got to the edges where I wanted the blur to start, I set the flow to 50%, so the motion blur sort of gradually appears without any hard edges. I did the same for other parts of his body too. I just thought the effect would look nicer if it's coming out the back of his body instead of his whole body, so it does actually look like he's zooming past the camera and it's just like some trail that's coming out from behind him. Also, if you make a mistake and brush away too much, you can always switch the foreground and background colors and then paint back what you just got rid of. So yeah, that's the effect. One last thing to do is bring the photo into Lightroom, slap on a preset, make some quick exposure adjustments, and then we're good. I think it looks pretty cool, and I hope it looks nice on Spotify. Okay, one other thing. The version that you see on Spotify, I actually created like 4 or 5 months ago, and in my opinion, it's a lot worse than the version I've created today, so sorry about that. But Photoshop takes time to learn, so I'm always going to be learning and improving along the way, and that's the most important part. Go check out Nico on Spotify, his artist name is Gali. The song you heard at the beginning of the video is a new one, and it's not yet out on Spotify, but it will be out really soon, along with his new album, so get ready for that. And yeah, we'll definitely be making another album cover for that soon too. So stay tuned, see you next week.